children depends on the gender of the victim, among other intersecting aspects of their identity. The Commission has an important role to play in providing the Council with an intersectional gender analysis of violations to ensure that future justice and reconstruction efforts serve the needs of the entire population. Mr. President, UN Women stands ready to work with partners to promote accountability for sexual and gender-based violence, respond to the gender impacts of violence and aggression, and to support an enabling environment for women's meaningful participation in the equitable and sustainable reconstruction of Ukraine. I thank you.
Gracias.
Thank you. Switzerland has the floor. Madam Vice President, Switzerland would like to thank the Commission of Inquiry for its important work in investigating and reiterates its support. Switzerland is deeply concerned with the findings of the Commission, which show the deterioration of the human rights situation in relation with the military aggression of Russia against Ukraine. The reports and accounts of incidents of rape, torture and other inhuman acts perpetrated against civilians and prisoners of war in areas under control of the Russian Federation are deeply concerning. The amount of all of these credible allegations highlights the need for the mandate of the Commission of Inquiry. For Switzerland, accountability is essential. This must be based on all facts, the gathering of evidence, and the identification of those responsible for human rights violations and violations of international humanitarian law. We welcome the approach of the Commission of Inquiry focused on victims and survivors. Switzerland calls on all parties to respect international humanitarian law and human rights. It calls on the Russian Federation to cease its attacks against the civilian population, civilian infrastructure, and calls for a guarantee of access to the Commission of Inquiry. Chair of the Commission, what is your approach to access regions of Ukraine currently occupied by the Russian Federation in order to proceed with your inquiry into the situation? Thank you.
Gracias.
Thank you. I now give the floor to Liechtenstein.
Thank you, Madam Vice President. We thank the Commission for its oral update and its crucial work on accountability. The recently published conference room paper based on a detailed account of the evidence gathered showcases the brutality and the wide range of grave human rights and humanitarian law violations committed by the Russian armed forces. We condemn the systematic and widespread use of torture, the willful killings of civilians and summary executions, attacks on civilians, rape, unlawful confinement, and unlawful transfers, as documented by the Commission. Liechtenstein strongly supports the establishment of a special tribunal on the crime of aggression, as aggression is ultimately the origin of all other international crimes committed in Ukraine. Given that the crime of aggression is a leadership crime, it is also of crucial importance to ensure that there are no immunities. In conclusion, I would reiterate Liechtenstein's solidarity with Ukraine and its people. Moreover, we strongly support the Commission's important work. I thank you, Madam Vice President.
Gracias.
Thank you. The Republic of Korea has the floor.
Thank you, Madam Vice President. The Republic of Korea thanks the Commission of Inquiry for its update. As Russia's illegal war against Ukraine shows no sign of abating, we remain profoundly concerned by the devastating consequences of the ongoing conflict. Reports of continued human rights violations and attacks against civilians and civilian infrastructure are truly alarming. It must stop immediately. In particular, we deplore the recent attacks on Ukrainian port facilities, which risk having far-reaching impacts. The Commission's findings of willful killing, unlawful confinement, torture, and sexual violence. We stress once again that ensuring accountability for all violations of international human rights and international humanitarian law is vital to achieve justice for victims and prevent further violations. We strongly support the crucial work of the COI on Ukraine in this regard. Lastly, the Republic of Korea reaffirms its solidarity with the people of Ukraine and reiterates that the sovereignty, territorial integrity, and independence of Ukraine should be respected. I thank you.
Gracias.
Thank you. Czechia has the floor.
Thank you, Madam Vice President. Czechia aligns itself with the EU statement and thanks the Commission for its update. Your presentation has provided evidence of the devastating impact of the Russian aggression on civilian lives of Ukrainians and of a wide range of human rights and humanitarian law violations and corresponding crimes. It is outrageous that Russian authorities committed willful killings, attacks on civilians, unlawful confinement, torture, rape and sexual violence, or deportation of Ukrainian children and civilians to Russia. Moreover, as a result of barbaric Russian actions such as mining the fields or blowing up the Kakhovka Dam, Russia is committing crimes against the environment, making the regions uninhabitable for hundreds of thousands of civilians. Perpetrators, including at the highest level, must be brought to justice. Russia must be held accountable for all committed crimes. Horrendous war crimes from last 2 years should not overshadow continuously dire human rights situation on Crimean Peninsula, illegally occupied by Russia. Once again, we want to raise our voice for seriously ill Crimean political prisoners such as Irina Danilovich, Emir Usenkuk, or Volodymyr Dutya. We call on Russian authorities to immediately and unconditionally release all Ukrainian political prisoners. Could the Commission please elaborate on possibilities of monitoring and access to places of detention of Ukrainian prisoners in Russia or territories occupied by Russia? Thank you.
Gracias.
Thank you. Italy has the floor.
Vice President, Italy aligns itself with your statement. The Italian position on the Russian aggression against Ukraine is very clear and well known. We stand with Ukraine and its people, which are fighting to defend their freedom, sovereignty and independence and territorial integrity against a blatant violation of United Nations Charter. This unprovoked and unjustified war continues to cause enormous suffering to the Ukrainian people. We reiterate our support for the investigations by the Commission of Inquiry and other initiatives to ensure accountability for the violations of human rights and international humanitarian law and related crimes in Ukraine, including attacks on civilians and civilian infrastructure, summary executions, torture, sexual and gender-based violence, as well as unlawful transport and deportation of children. The repercussions of the conflict in Ukraine affect all our society, and in particular the most vulnerable countries, increasing in particular food insecurity. Therefore, Italy firmly condemns Russia's decision to suspend participation in the Black Sea Grain Initiative. A comprehensive, just and lasting peace remains our ultimate goal, and Italy supports President Zelensky's 10-point peace formula. We are also at the forefront of reconstruction efforts in Ukraine, which will be one of the top priorities of the Italian presidency of the G7 next year. I thank you.
Gracias.
Thank you. Slovenia, you have the floor.
Madam Vice President, we align with the EU statement. We would like to thank the Commission of Inquiry for its update. Slovenia welcomes the recently published conference room paper, which highlights patterns of a wide range of violations by the Russian armed forces that target the civilian population to inflict extensive fear, misery, humiliation, and destruction. The body of evidence that the Commission has found regarding acts committed by the Russian authorities in areas that come under their control is substantial. The maltreatment of children is especially telling of the inhumanity of the aggressor. Children were transferred or deported to Russian-occupied areas or to the Russian Federation. They were separated from their family. Instead of facilitating the reunion of families, the Russian authorities dispersed them with the aim of facilitating long-term placements of Ukrainian children in the Russian Federation. This cruel policy was in complete disregard of the child's rights to preserve his or her identity and family relations. Slovenia supports the recommendations made by the Commission to investigate and prosecute all allegations of international crime, violations of human rights and international humanitarian law. The Commission recently called for the establishment of comprehensive repatriation programs. Could you please share your thoughts on where to start and how to achieve such wide-ranging accountability? I thank you.
Gracias.
Thank you. Portugal, you have the floor.
Vice President, Portugal aligns with the European Union statement and with the statement of the Group of Friends of Accountability following the aggression against Ukraine. We thank the Commission of Inquiry for its oral update. We express our support for the crucial work it has been conducting, documenting the violations and abuses of human rights in Ukraine following Russia's illegal and unprovoked aggression. Today's update and previous reports were the result of thorough efforts in collecting evidence, in assessing its credibility and analyzing patterns. They show that there are serious violations of international law happening in Ukraine's territory committed by Russia's armed forces that may amount to war crimes and crimes against humanity. The Commission has unearthed solid evidence of willful killings, attacks on civilians, unlawful confinements, torture, rape and deportation of children. Now that the facts are established, accountability must follow. The international community cannot turn a blind eye to these findings. Impunity cannot be an option. Portugal will continue to back all accountability efforts, namely at the UN, which includes ensuring that victims receive justice and reparation. Muchas gracias.
Gracias.
Thank you. Finland, you have the floor.
Mrs. Vice President, Finland aligns itself with the EU statement. We firmly support the Commission's indispensable mandate. The evidence gathered by the Commission demonstrates that Russian authorities have committed acts of sexual and gender-based violence involving women, men and girls. These brutal acts include rape, threat of rape, sexual slavery and forced nudity, often taking place during detention or forced visits to victims' houses. As the recent conference room paper of the Commission states, these violations severely impact victims and their families. Some survivors have left their communities due to stigma. Let me underline, rape and sexual violence may amount to torture, war crimes and crimes against humanity. Russia must immediately end these grave violations. Victims and survivors deserve full accountability and access to justice. Russia's aggression disproportionately impacts persons in vulnerable situations. 2.7 million persons with disabilities are affected, often unable to seek safety and without access to even most basic services. These barriers need to be made visible. Mr. Merse, how can we more effectively address the needs of persons in vulnerable situations? I thank you.
Gracias. Ella fue la...
Thank you. This was the last speaker that we could accommodate for this meeting. Excellencies, distinguished colleagues, this brings us to the end of this session. We will reconvene at 3 p.m. to continue the interactive dialogue on the oral update of the Independent International Commission of Inquiry on Ukraine, followed by the interactive dialogue with the Independent International Fact-Finding Mission on the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela. I hereby close the 21st meeting of the 54th session of the Human Rights Council.